The river rushed with unusual force that spring, swollen with melted snow from the distant mountains. Weston pulled his horse to a stop at the ridge overlooking Broken Creek, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun. What caught his eye wasn't the glittering water or the cottonwoods swaying in the breeze. It was the figure of a woman, heavily pregnant, standing dangerously close to the river's edge, her skirts billowing in the wind. Without hesitation, Finn spurred his horse down the embankment, dismounting in one fluid motion before the animal had fully stopped. The woman was sobbing, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching a worn leather satchel. She stood at the very edge where the rushing water had carved away at the soil, creating a precarious ledge that could collapse at any moment. "Madam," Finn called, approaching carefully. "Step back. There's hope yet." The woman turned, her tear-stained face registering surprise at his sudden appearance. Her eyes were the color of a summer storm, wide with desperation and fear. "There's no hope," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rushing water. "Not anymore." Finn held out his hand, not daring to move closer to the unstable edge. "I don't know what's brought you here, but whatever it is, this ain't the answer. Please step back." For a moment she seemed poised to refuse, but then she glanced down at her belly. Something in her expression shifted. With a trembling sigh, she took his outstretched hand. As she stepped away from the edge, the ground beneath her foot gave way. Finn yanked her forward with all his strength, just as the earth crumbled into the churning waters below. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing. "My name's Finn Weston," he said gently, supporting her weight. "I've got a cabin not far from here. Let's get you somewhere safe." "Nora," she replied, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Nora Geller." Finn helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her to ensure she wouldn't fall. As they rode toward his cabin, she remained silent, her body occasionally shaking with suppressed sobs. He wondered what desperate circumstances had brought a pregnant woman to the edge of Broken Creek, alone and seemingly ready to end it all. Colorado Territory in 1876 was no place for a woman without protection, especially one with child. His cabin came into view as they crested a small hill, a modest structure he'd built with his own hands after leaving Texas 3 years ago. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy and warm, with a small corral for his horses and a garden he'd started that spring. "It's not fancy," he apologized as he helped her down, "but you're welcome to stay as long as you need." Nora looked at the cabin, then at him, wariness evident in her gaze. "Why would you help a stranger?" Finn removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-bleached hair. "My ma taught me never to turn away from someone in need. Besides," he added with a gentle smile, "out here, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet." He showed her inside, apologizing for the bachelor state of the place, a single room with a bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, a small stove, and shelves lined with canned goods and books. He immediately gave up his bed for her, insisting he was perfectly comfortable on the floor. As he prepared a simple supper of beans and bacon, Nora sat at the table, her hands folded protectively over her belly. "How far along are you?" Finn asked, trying to make conversation. "Almost 8 months, I reckon," she replied quietly. "And the father," Nora's face hardened, "dead. Killed in a mining accident 3 months back." Finn nodded, not pressing further. "I'm sorry for your loss, are you?" There was a challenge in her voice. "You don't know what kind of man he was." "No, I don't," Finn agreed, placing a plate before her. "But I know loss is hard regardless." They ate in silence, but as night fell and the cabin grew dark save for the light of a single lantern, Nora began to talk. Her husband, Jackson Geller, had been a miner with a penchant for gambling. When he died, she discovered he'd amassed considerable debts. The creditors had taken everything: their home, their possessions, even her wedding ring. "I've been moving east, hoping to reach my sister in Kansas," she explained, her voice tired. "But yesterday the stage was robbed. They took what little I had left." Her hand gripped the leather satchel she'd refused to relinquish. "This is all I have now: letters from my mother, a daguerreotype of my parents, nothing of value to anyone but me." "That's why you were at the river?" Finn asked softly. Nora looked away. "I just couldn't see a path forward. A woman alone, about to have a child, no money, no home." Her voice broke. "I wasn't thinking straight." "You'll stay here," Finn said decisively. "At least until after the baby comes. Then we'll figure out how to get you to your sister." She studied him in the lamplight. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's right," he answered simply. That night, as Finn lay on his bedroll near the stove, listening to Nora's steady breathing from the bed, he found himself wondering how a simple ride to check his fence line had turned into rescuing a pregnant widow. But something about her courage in the face of such desperate circumstances touched him deeply. He'd seen his share of hardship since leaving Texas, but nothing compared to what this woman had endured. As the days passed, a routine developed. Finn would rise at dawn to tend to his small herd of cattle and horses, while Nora, despite her condition, insisted on keeping the cabin and preparing meals. At first, conversation between them was minimal, but gradually, as trust grew, they began to share more of themselves. Finn told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 19, about drifting north afterward, unable to bear the emptiness of the family home. He spoke of his dream to build a proper ranch here in Colorado, of the plans he'd drawn up for a larger house. Nora shared stories of her childhood in Ohio, of her sister who had married a shopkeeper in Kansas, of her own dreams of having a family that now seemed bittersweet in light of her husband's death and her current circumstances. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold, Nora suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her belly. "What is it?" Finn asked, alarmed. "The baby," she said, a smile breaking across her face. "Here, feel." Before he could protest, she had taken his hand and placed it against the swell of her stomach. Beneath his palm, he felt a strong kick. "That's quite a fighter you've got there," he said, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. "She is," Nora agreed, then caught herself. "Or he. I don't know which. Either way, they'll be as strong as their mother," Finn replied. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Finn quickly withdrew his hand, suddenly aware of the impropriety. She was a widow, vulnerable and dependent on his charity. The last thing he wanted was for her to think he expected anything in return for his help. As her time grew closer, Finn rode to the nearest town, Silverdale, to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Abernathy, a stern but kind woman who had delivered most of the children in the region. She examined Nora and declared both mother and child healthy, then took Finn aside. "That woman's been through hell," Mrs. Abernathy said bluntly. "Whatever you're doing to help her, keep doing it. She needs someone on her side." "I aim to see her safely to her sister after the baby comes," Finn explained. The older woman gave him a knowing look. "That's so. Well, plans have a way of changing, Mr. Weston. I've seen it often enough." Finn ignored the implication, but found himself thinking about it as he rode back to the cabin. The truth was, in the month since Nora had arrived, his solitary life had been transformed. The cabin felt like a home now, not just a place to sleep. The sound of her humming as she worked, the smell of bread baking, the conversations that stretched late into the evening. He had grown accustomed to these things, even dependent on them. But Nora had her own life to rebuild, and he had no right to complicate that with his growing feelings. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a stormy night, Nora's labor began. Finn rode through the downpour to fetch Mrs. Abernathy, returning just as dawn was breaking. For hours, he paced outside the cabin, flinching at every cry that came from within. Finally, as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, a different sound reached his ears, the wail of a newborn. Mrs. Abernathy opened the door, her apron stained but her face triumphant. "You can come in now, Mr. Weston. Come meet the newest resident of your property." Inside, Nora sat propped up in bed, her face exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in one of Finn's old shirts that had been repurposed as a blanket. "Finn," she said softly, "meet my daughter, Hope." The name struck him immediately, a reference to his words by the river. He approached cautiously, as if the infant might break if he stepped too heavily. "Hope," he repeated, looking down at the tiny red face. "It suits her." "I wanted her to carry a reminder," Nora explained, her eyes meeting his. "Of the day someone believed there was still hope for us when I couldn't see it myself." Mrs. Abernathy cleared her throat. "I'll leave you 3B for now. I'll come back to check on the little one tomorrow." With a knowing smile, she gathered her things and departed. For the next few weeks, Finn watched in awe as Nora navigated the challenges of motherhood with the same quiet determination she approached everything else. He found himself increasingly involved in little Hope's care, rocking her when she was fussy, walking the floor with her at night to give Nora a chance to rest, fashioning a cradle from wood he'd been saving for furniture. As spring gave way to summer, Finn postponed mentioning Nora's journey to Kansas, and she never brought it up. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, like a family, though neither acknowledged the shift in their relationship. But Finn saw it in the way Nora's hand lingered on his when passing the salt at dinner, in the way she watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, in the way she'd begun to speak of "we" and "us" when discussing future plans for the garden or the livestock. One evening, as they sat on the porch with Hope sleeping in Nora's arms, a rider approached. Finn recognized him as Tom Jenkins, one of the men from town who occasionally stopped by to trade news. "Evening, Finn," Tom called, dismounting. "Got a letter for Mrs. Geller here. Came to the general store with instructions to find her at your place." Nora looked surprised as she accepted the envelope. "It must be from my sister. I wrote to her from Silverdale last month." After Tom departed, Nora handed Hope to Finn so she could open the letter. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to shock. "What is it?" Finn asked, gently rocking the sleeping infant. "It's from a lawyer in Denver," she explained, her voice unsteady. "It seems Jackson had a claim to a silver mine, a small share, but the mine struck a rich vein just before he died. His share, my share, now it's worth quite a lot." Finn felt a strange mix of emotions, happiness for her good fortune, but also a sinking feeling. With money of her own, Nora would no longer need to rely on him. She could go to her sister as planned or anywhere else she chose. "That's wonderful news," he managed, forcing a smile. "You and Hope will be well provided for." Nora was silent, studying the letter. "Yes," she finally said, "we will be." That night, after Hope was settled in her cradle, Finn sat at the table with a cup of coffee, trying to prepare himself for what seemed inevitable. Nora would leave, taking Hope with her, and he would return to his solitary existence. The thought left a hollow feeling in his chest. Nora joined him, pouring herself a cup. "I've been thinking," she began, not meeting his eyes, "about what this money means." "You can go to your sister now," Finn said, trying to sound supportive. "Start fresh, give Hope a proper home." "Is that what you want?" she asked, finally looking at him. "For us to leave?" The question caught him off guard. "What I want doesn't matter, you have choices now." "It matters to me," Nora insisted, "because I hoped, that maybe we had built something here, the three of us." Finn's heart hammered in his chest. Nora, when I found you at the river, all I wanted was to help. I never expected anything in return. I know that, she said softly. That's part of why I. She paused, gathering courage. Why I've come to care for you, to love you if I'm being honest. The words hung in the air between them. Finn reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I love you too, he admitted. And hope. But I needed to be sure you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had nowhere else to go. Tears shimmered in Nora's eyes. This is where I want to be, with you, if you'll have us. I can't imagine my life without either of you now, Finn said, his voice rough with emotion. But I want to do this right. He hesitated, then continued. I know it's soon after Jackson's passing, and I understand if you need more time, but when you're ready, I'd be honored to call you my wife. Nora's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I don't need more time. I know who I want. The next morning, they rode into Silverdale together, Hope bundled securely in Nora's arms. They spoke with the preacher, who agreed to perform a simple ceremony the following Sunday. News traveled fast in a small town, and by the time they returned to the cabin, 3 women from neighboring homesteads had arrived with food, baby clothes, and offers to help prepare for the wedding. Word spreads faster than wildfire, Finn commented as they watched the women depart, the cabin now filled with their gifts and good wishes. Does it bother you? Nora asked. All this attention? Finn shook his head. No, I'm proud to have everyone know you've chosen me. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Finn had spent the previous night at his neighbor's, adhering to tradition despite Nora's teasing that it was a bit late for such propriety. When he arrived at the small church in Silverdale, he was surprised to find it full. It seemed every resident within riding distance had come to witness the union of the solitary rancher and the widow he'd rescued from the river's edge. Nora walked down the aisle in a simple blue dress, a crown of wildflowers in her hair, carrying Hope, who wore a matching flower tucked into her blanket. Finn, in his best shirt and a new vest purchased for the occasion, felt his breath catch at the sight of them. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. As they exchanged vows, Finn added his own promise. I pledge to be a father to Hope, to love her as my own, and to remember always the day by the river that brought you both into my life. There wasn't a dry eye in the church when they were pronounced husband and wife. The celebration afterward was lively, with music and dancing in the town square. As evening approached, Finn and Nora prepared to return to their cabin, their home now, truly. Mrs. Weston, Finn said, helping her into the wagon where Hope slept peacefully in a basket. I like the sound of that. So do I, Mr. Weston, Nora replied, her eyes shining with happiness. So do I. As they drove away, calls of congratulations and good wishes followed them. Finn couldn't help but marvel at how his life had changed in just a few months. From a solitary existence to a family, from quiet loneliness to a home filled with love. Back at the cabin, with Hope settled in her cradle, Finn and Nora stood on the porch, looking out at the land that was now their shared dream. I was thinking, Nora said, leaning against his shoulder, with the money from the mine, we could build that bigger house you've been planning. Maybe add a few more cattle to the herd. I'd like that, Finn agreed, though I've been perfectly happy right here. So have I, she said softly, happier than I ever thought possible again. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. When I found you that day, I had no idea you'd end up saving me too. Saving you? Nora looked puzzled. From a life half-lived, Finn explained. I was existing, not living. You and Hope changed that. Under the vast Colorado sky, they sealed their new beginning with a kiss, the promise of their future stretching out before them like the endless prairie. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The larger house was built the following spring, a sturdy two-story structure with a wraparound porch and enough rooms for the growing family they both hoped for. The herd expanded, as did their garden, and soon the Weston ranch became known for its fine cattle and warm hospitality. Hope grew from a curious infant to a spirited toddler who followed Finn everywhere, proudly declaring herself Papa's helper, as she carried tiny handfuls of feed to the chickens or held his tools while he mended fences. Her first word had been Papa, a moment that had brought unexpected tears to Finn's eyes. When Hope was 2, Nora gave birth to twins Frederick and Franklin, 2 sturdy boys with their father's blue eyes and their mother's determined temperament. The cabin that had once seemed so empty to Finn now couldn't contain the life and love that overflowed within its walls, necessitating the addition of another room to the main house. Life on the frontier remained challenging. There were harsh winters when the snow piled high around the house, summers of drought when they worried for their cattle, and the constant work that came with building a ranch from scratch. But through it all, Finn and Nora faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger with every challenge overcome. One spring morning, 5 years after their wedding, Finn found Nora standing by Broken Creek, at the spot where they had first met. Hope, now a confident 5-year-old, played nearby, showing her 3-year-old brothers how to skip stones across the water's surface. "Careful now," Finn called to the children. "Not too close to the edge." "Yes, Papa," Hope replied, her serious expression a miniature version of her mother's. She herded her brothers back a few steps, ever the responsible oldest child. Nora smiled as Finn came to stand beside her. "I was just thinking about that day," she said. "How close I came to." "But you didn't," Finn interrupted gently, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Because of you," she replied. "Because you saw hope when I couldn't." Finn looked at their children playing by the water, then back at his wife, whose beauty had only deepened with the passing years and the challenges they'd weathered together. "I think we both found hope that day," he said. "And we've been building on it ever since." As if to punctuate his words, Hope looked up and waved at them, her smile bright as the sun reflecting off the water. The twins, seeing their sister, did the same, their chubby hands flapping enthusiastically. "Mama, Papa, look at the fish," Hope called, pointing excitedly at something in the clear water. Hand in hand, Finn and Nora walked over to join their children, bending down to see the small trout darting beneath the surface. "Can we catch it for supper?" Hope asked eagerly. Finn laughed. "We can try. I'll teach you how to fish properly, not just with your hands." "I want to learn too," the twins chorused, jumping up and down. "Everyone will learn," Nora promised. "But first, let's have our picnic." They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree, unpacking the lunch Nora had prepared. As they ate, Finn found himself marveling yet again at how full his life had become. From the solitary man who had ridden alone along this creek 5 years ago to the father and husband who now sat surrounded by the love of his family, the transformation still sometimes felt like a miracle. Later that day, as they rode back to the ranch, Nora and Finn on their own horses, the children sharing a gentle pony Finn had trained specifically for them, Hope asked a question that caught them both by surprise. "Papa, why did you tell Mama to step back at the river?" Finn and Nora exchanged a glance, having never fully explained the circumstances of their first meeting to the children. "Your Mama was standing very close to the edge," Finn explained carefully, "and the ground wasn't stable. I was worried she might fall in." Hope considered this. "And you said there was hope." "I did," Finn confirmed, touched that their daughter somehow knew these details of a story they hadn't shared with her. "I believed things could get better, even if they seemed dark at that moment." Like when it rains but then the sun comes out? Hope asked. Exactly like that, Nora said, smiling at her daughter's simple wisdom. And your papa was right. Things did get better. Much better. Hope nodded, satisfied with this explanation. I'm glad you didn't fall in the river, Mama, and I'm glad Papa found you. So am I, sweetheart, Nora replied, her eyes meeting Finn's over their daughter's head. So am I. As they crested the hill that revealed their ranch, the main house with smoke curling from the chimney, the barn painted red against the green pastures, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance, Finn felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what he had been building toward his whole life, though he hadn't known it until Nora and Hope came into his world. That night, after the children were asleep, Finn and Nora sat on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky. I've been thinking, Nora said, her head resting against his shoulder, about expanding the garden again, maybe planting some apple trees on the south slope. Planning for the future? Finn asked, smiling. Always, she replied. Someone once taught me there's always hope for tomorrow. Finn kissed the top of her head. Wise words. From a wise man, Nora agreed. After a moment she added, I've also been thinking that Hope might like a sister. Finn looked at her, surprised. Are you saying? Nora nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Doctor Williams confirmed it yesterday when I went to town for supplies. Come winter, there'll be another Weston in this house. Joy flooded through Finn as he pulled his wife close. Another child, he said wonderingly. Our family keeps growing. Is that all right? Nora asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. All right, Finn repeated. Nora, it's everything I could want. Everything I never knew I needed until you came into my life. They sat in contented silence for a while, planning and dreaming as the moon rose high above the ranch. In December, just as the first heavy snow blanketed the land, Sarah Weston was born, a tiny, perfect girl with a shock of dark hair and her mother's storm-gray eyes. Hope took to her role as big sister with solemn dedication, while the twins regarded the new arrival with a mixture of curiosity and slight suspicion at having to share even more of their parents' attention. As spring returned to the land, bringing with it new calves and fresh green shoots in the garden, Finn often found himself pausing in his work to watch his family, Nora with baby Sarah on her hip, directing Hope in the planting of vegetable seeds, the twins chasing each other through the newly turned earth, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. In these moments, he would think back to that fateful day by the river, to the desperate woman on the edge and the words that had changed both their lives. Step back. There's hope yet. Neither of them could have imagined then just how much hope there would be, hope that had manifested in their children, in their thriving ranch, in the love that had grown between them, as steady and life-giving as the river itself. One summer evening, as they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with friends and neighbors gathered in their yard, the local preacher raised a toast to the couple. To Finn and Nora Weston, he said, lifting his glass, whose story reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, hope awaits, sometimes in the form of a stranger who becomes the greatest blessing of our lives. Glasses clinked, congratulations were offered, and music played late into the night. As the last guests departed, Finn found Nora standing alone on the porch, gazing up at the stars. Happy, Mrs. Weston? He asked, coming to stand beside her. More than I ever dreamed possible, she replied, leaning into his embrace. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden by the river that day? Finn considered the question. I believe some things are meant to be, he said finally, but I'm grateful every day that I was there at that moment. As am I, Nora whispered. You saved more than just my life that day. We saved each other, Finn corrected gently, and we've been doing it every day since. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Hope, now a thoughtful 10-year-old with her mother's quiet strength. The 8-year-old twins as rambunctious and loyal as ever, little Sarah at 5 already showing signs of her father's steadfastness, and the youngest, 3-year-old Daniel, a perfect blend of both his parents. Their life together hadn't been without hardship. There had been the year when drought threatened their herd, the winter when illness swept through the family, the challenges of raising 5 spirited children on the frontier. But through it all, the foundation they had built remained unshaken, a love born of compassion, strengthened by shared struggle, and sustained by the family they had created together. As they prepared for bed that night, Finn pulled a small package from his dresser drawer. "I have something for you," he said, handing it to Nora, "for our anniversary." She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a silver locket. Inside was a tiny painting on one side, the spot by Broken Creek where they had first met, and on the other, their family, rendered in meticulous detail by a traveling artist who had stayed with them the previous autumn. "It's beautiful," Nora said, tears welling in her eyes as she traced the images with her fingertip. "Our beginning and our present." "And a reminder," Finn added, fastening the locket around her neck, "that sometimes the greatest journeys start with a single step back from the edge." Nora touched the locket, then reached up to caress his face, the same face that had appeared to her like a vision on that desperate day by the river, offering words of hope when she had none of her own. "I love you, Finn Weston," she said simply. "For saving me, for believing in me, for building this life with me." "And I love you," he replied, "for giving me a reason to be more than I was for our children, for every day of this journey we're on together." Outside, the Colorado night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Inside, the Weston home stood sturdy and warm, sheltering the family that had grown from a chance encounter by a river's edge, a testament to the power of hope, compassion, and love to transform lives. And though neither Finn nor Nora could know what challenges and joys the future might hold, they faced tomorrow with the same faith that had brought them together, a belief that as long as they had each other, there would always be hope yet.